The vibration of my phone against the black quartz kitchen island cut through the low mechanical hum of the refrigerator. The clock on the wall oven read exactly 7:00 a.m. When your phone rings that early and the caller ID shows the direct corporate line for Halcyon Federal Bank, you answer it. I swiped the screen. Ethan Cross. Mr. Cross. This is Andrew Mercer, branch director at our downtown office. His voice had none of the polished warmth he used during my quarterly portfolio reviews. It sounded clipped, controlled, too tight. "I need you to confirm you're alone," he said, "and I need you to sit down." I didn't sit. I reached over and switched off the coffee grinder. "I'm standing. Andrew, tell me." I heard a mouse click twice over the line. "At 3:04 this morning, our fraud division placed an emergency lock on your profile. There is currently $96,800 in credit card debt under your Social Security number." The kitchen seemed brighter all at once, sharper. I didn't ask how that was possible. I skipped the panic and went straight to the structure. "My credit files have been frozen for years," I said. "I haven't applied for revolving credit since I bought this house." "I know," Andrew said quietly. "That's why I'm calling you directly." The application bypassed the normal hard inquiry suppression through an internal verification override tied to your account history. Then he lowered his voice another notch. "And the people using that card are in my lobby right now demanding I remove the freeze so they can force one final wire transfer through." My hand tightened against the edge of the counter. "Who, a man and two women. They're carrying authorized user cards linked to your profile. They identified themselves as your parents and your younger sister." For 1 second, everything in me went still. Not strangers, not a breach in the abstract. My family. "They're threatening my staff with a corporate complaint," Andrew continued. "They say the wire is for a commercial lease deposit." "Do not release anything," I said. "And don't tell them you reached me." I ended the call, crossed to the office safe, and pulled out my passport, Social Security card, and driver's license. Panic is for people with cushions. I had documents. I sealed the documents inside a hard plastic folder, grabbed my keys, and walked out of the house without calling anyone. I didn't call my mother to hear her lie in real time. I didn't text my father to give him a head start. I didn't message my sister to ask what she thought she was doing. Guilty people thrive on noise. They need confusion. Overlapping stories, wounded tones, raised voices. Noise blurs sequence, noise buys time. Paper doesn't. The morning air outside still carried the thin, cold edge of early spring. My black Range Rover sat under a film of pale dew at the curb. I slid behind the wheel, set the document folder on the passenger seat, and started the engine. The navigation screen glowed to life, but I already knew the route downtown. 18 minutes in light traffic. 22 if the first wave of commuters had already started choking the expressway. I backed out, turned toward the avenue, and kept both hands on the wheel. People think composure means you feel nothing. That isn't true. It means feeling everything and refusing to let any of it touch the controls. My heartbeat was elevated. My jaw was tight enough to hurt. Somewhere underneath the discipline, anger had already started to harden into something colder. But anger was useless this early. Anger doesn't preserve evidence. Anger doesn't freeze wire transfers. Anger doesn't hold up when someone across a desk asks what exactly happened and in what order. I ran the sequence in my head instead. A fraudulent application had been submitted 22 days ago. Whoever did it knew my Social Security number, my banking relationship, and enough of my profile to trigger an internal override. They had supplementary cards in hand. They were standing inside the branch at 7 in the morning trying to push a final wire through before the system closed around them. That meant urgency. Urgency meant exposure. Exposure meant mistakes. My family had made one already. They'd shown up in person. Gray morning traffic slid past the windshield in blurred ribbons of brake lights and steel. A delivery truck drifted into my lane, then corrected. I barely noticed. My attention stayed on the folder beside me. Passport, license, original Social Security card. Real identity, real timeline, real chain of custody. If they had built this fraud by rerouting verification, spoofing contact data, and manufacturing consent, then the only thing that mattered now was establishing a clean line between what was mine and what they had fabricated. By the time the downtown skyline rose through the haze, my breathing had evened out. No speeches, no scene, no family argument in a parking lot. Just the bank, the records. The first person who panicked would lose. When I pulled into Halcyon Federal's private client lot, I saw my father's dark Mercedes sedan and my sister's white SUV parked in the premium visitor spaces nearest the glass entrance. That told me everything I needed to know. I killed the engine and sat there for 1 second, looking through the windshield at the 2 vehicles parked nearest the entrance like they belonged there. My father's Mercedes S-Class still had road dust along the lower panels from a trip he probably hadn't bothered to make himself. My sister's white Range Rover sat beside it, spotless, polished, expensive in the way people get expensive when they're spending money they never earned. I took the folder, stepped out, and crossed the lot without breaking stride. The security guard was just unlocking the outer doors when I entered. The marble lobby carried that cold, polished silence banks have before opening, when everything feels staged and waiting for motion. My shoes struck the floor in clean, hard beats as I moved past the teller line and toward the private offices along the far wall. Then I saw them. My mother, Lorraine, was seated on a cream leather sofa beneath a framed abstract print, flipping through a financial magazine like she was waiting for a facial appointment. Her legs were crossed neatly at the ankle. Her silk blouse was pressed. Her posture was relaxed. She looked rested, comfortable, like none of this cost anything. My father, Victor, paced in front of Andrew Mercer's frosted glass office door with one hand in his coat pocket and the other checking his steel watch every few seconds. He had that expression he used in meetings when he wanted the room to believe incompetence was wasting his time. Manufactured irritation, corporate impatience, a man offended that a system had dared slow him down. My sister, Tessa, stood near the coffee station scrolling through her phone. She was wearing a camel cashmere coat with the stiff structure of something bought in the last 48 hours. Maybe less. A designer tote sat on the marble side table beside her, hardware catching the overhead light. New boots, fresh manicure, hair done, launch day costume for a business she hadn't built with her own money. They weren't nervous. That was the part that landed hardest. They weren't cornered, ashamed, or even cautious. They were annoyed, mildly inconvenienced. As if the only real problem in the room was that fraud controls were interrupting their schedule. They were wearing my credit line. My mother saw me first. Her eyes lifted from the magazine, and for the briefest second I watched recognition settle in. Not guilt, not fear, calculation. Then her face rearranged itself into that familiar expression of patient disappointment she used whenever she wanted witnesses to assume I was the unreasonable one. She rose smoothly and adjusted one cuff. "Ethan," she said, loud enough for the tellers behind the counter to hear, "there's really no need for you to come down here and turn this into a spectacle." My father stopped pacing and looked over at me with visible annoyance, like I'd arrived late to clean up something inconvenient but routine. Tessa finally glanced up from her screen, then rolled her eyes and looked away again, standing there under the sterile bank lighting, looking at the coat, the bag, the vehicles, the posture, the complete absence of shame. I understood something with absolute clarity. This wasn't desperation. It was entitlement with receipts. My mother took 2 measured steps toward me, one hand still resting lightly on the magazine, as if she might return to it once this minor interruption was handled. "Andrew never should have called you directly," she said, her tone pitched with soft, public patience. "Tessa ran into a temporary cash flow issue with the studio, and the commercial lenders are being absurd about timing. That's all this is, a timing issue." I stopped 3 feet from her and said nothing. She mistook silence for room to keep talking. "You have a stable career, substantial liquidity, and excellent standing with this bank. Your sister is trying to build something. A family helps when one of its own hits a short-term obstacle. It did not require this kind of performance." There it was. Not denial, not even a real attempt at denial, just repackaging theft in the language of family duty. My father exhaled through his nose and stepped in before I could answer, like he was taking over a meeting that had drifted off agenda. "Let's be adults about this," Victor said. "It's a bridge solution, not a crime scene. We used your profile to secure temporary credit, and we'll cover the minimums until Tessa's lease is stabilized and revenue starts moving. Then it gets paid down. End of problem." He said it with the relaxed certainty of a man explaining a tax strategy over lunch. My eyes moved from him to my sister. Tessa lowered her phone just enough to look at me over the top of it. "Your utilization was basically 0, she said. "It's not like you were using the credit anyway. I honestly don't understand why you're being so territorial. Territorial. That word hung in the air for a second, almost impressive in its stupidity. They had opened a fraudulent account under my social security number, rerouted whatever security protocols the bank had in place, maxed out nearly $100,000, and were now standing in a private client branch explaining it like they had borrowed a ladder. My mother folded her arms lightly, still performing calm. You always do this. Ethan, you take a manageable family matter and turn it into something severe because you prefer control over perspective. Tessa needed help. You were in a position to provide it. We solved the problem efficiently. No, I said. Just that. My father's jaw tightened. No, what no? You didn't solve anything efficiently. You committed fraud. His expression darkened, but he kept his voice measured for the room. Watch the language is accurate. Tessa gave a short, irritated laugh. Oh my God, you're seriously going to do this here? My mother stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to sound intimate, while making sure every nearby employee could still hear the outline of her version. You are not going to damage your sister's future because you've decided to be dramatic over paperwork. Paperwork? She said federal fraud, the way other people say scheduling error. That was when the frosted glass office door opened and Andrew Mercer stepped into the threshold. His suit was immaculate, his face unreadable, his posture fully procedural. He looked once at my parents, once at Tessa, then directly at me. Mr. Cross, he said, please come in. My mother moved immediately. I need to be in this meeting, Lorraine said, placing a manicured hand against the frame. I'm managing this transaction, and my son is clearly confused about the family arrangement. Andrew didn't blink. Ma'am, he said, you are not the primary account holder. If you attempt to enter this office, I will have security remove you from the premises, for the first time that morning. Something in her face slipped. Then Andrew stepped aside for me, and I walked past my father without another word. I stepped into Andrew Mercer's office and heard the door shut behind me with a heavy mechanical click. The sound mattered. Outside that glass, my family still had volume, posture, and performance. Inside, none of that counted. Inside, there were records. Andrew moved behind his desk without offering coffee, condolences, or any of the polished client-facing language bankers use when they want a problem to feel smaller than it is. He woke both monitors, turned one toward me, and sat down. I have the original digital application file open, he said. Submitted 22 days ago at 11:43 p.m. Because your relationship history with Halcyon is exceptionally clean. The system accepted an internal override request tied to an existing profile match. That suppressed the first layer of friction. I set the plastic folder on his desk, opened it, and laid out my passport, driver's license, and social security card in a straight line on the polished wood. I want to see how they got past two-factor authentication, I said. Andrew nodded once and angled the monitor farther in my direction. Dense gray fields filled the screen timestamps, IP entries, application metadata, contact details, device flags. The layout was clinical, stripped of emotion, exactly what I needed. Our fraud team flagged the outgoing wire late last night, he said. Standard verification protocol triggered an outbound call to the primary account holder. They did not reach you. He scrolled down. The applicant name was mine. Date of birth, mine. Social security number, mine. Employment band close enough to pass automated confidence thresholds. But the contact section wasn't mine. Andrew tapped the screen with one finger. Why is this phone number listed as yours? I looked at the 10 digits glowing under the header. My mother's cell number. Not close to mine. Not a typo. Not a transposition error. Intentional. Because that was the architecture. They hadn't just stolen my name. They had rerouted the bank's nervous system, so she could intercept every approval text, I said. Andrew's mouth flattened. He opened a second tab labeled Identity Verification Trace and began typing. If the contact number was changed during application, the system would require secondary visual authentication, he said. Government-issued photo ID to validate that the account holder personally authorized the data modification. He hit enter. A scanned image loaded at the center of the screen. Andrew went still for about 3 seconds. Not theatrically, just long enough for a professional to understand the size of what he was looking at. Then he glanced at the real license on his desk and turned the monitor another inch toward me. Mr. Cross, he said quietly. Look at the address. Then the signature. The face on the uploaded ID was mine, taken from an older photo, close enough to sell the illusion at a glance. But the listed address was not my home. It was my father's office. The exact street address of Cross Structural Group. And the signature at the bottom wasn't an imitation of mine. It wasn't even trying to be. It was my mother's. Flat, fast, confident. Lorraine had signed her own name under my face. She didn't even attempt a forgery, I said. Andrew leaned back, slowly, eyes still on the scan. That elevates this beyond unauthorized family use. This is synthetic identity theft paired with attempted federal wire fraud. He pulled up the audit log from the back end. Once the system accepted the uploaded ID, it allowed the applicant to update the primary contact channel. From there, every SMS verification code went directly to that number. The signature tier card was approved. Expedited shipping was authorized to your father's business address. You were cut out of the notification chain from day one. I didn't ask how long they'd been planning it. The answer was already sitting on the screen. They had built the trap first, then stepped into the bank as if the outcome was owed to them. I took out my leather notebook, clicked my pen, and looked at Andrew. "Show me the full ledger," I said. "I want every dollar." Andrew clicked into the transaction history, and a column of charges populated the second monitor in harsh red text. No rounding errors, no accidental subscriptions, no ambiguous merchant codes that could be explained away later. This was clean, deliberate spending. I read the first line item, $14,200, I said. Astor and Vale Interior Gallery. Andrew gave a short nod. Boutique Furnishings Showroom. The next entry loaded beneath it. $9,400 at Blackridge Electronics, $6,300 at Maris House Spa. I kept my face still, but the shape of it came together fast. The coat, the bag, the vehicles, the confidence in the lobby. They hadn't opened a fraudulent line of credit to survive an emergency room bill or stop an eviction notice. They'd used my identity to buy atmosphere, image, comfort, presentation. They were funding a performance. Andrew clicked open the merchant detail on the uploaded ID trace and then back to the audit pane. The card was used aggressively, he said. Luxury retail, vendor deposits, premium service categories. High-confidence spend behavior, which is why the limit accelerated so fast once the signature tier was approved. I wrote each number down anyway. Documentation matters more when the facts are ugly. Then my eyes moved to the highlighted line sitting near the top of the ledger in yellow. Pending status hold. Amount $48,500. Type outgoing wire transfer. That's the one they came in for. I said, yes? Where was it going? Andrew clicked through the routing detail. A side panel opened with beneficiary information, receiving institution, account classification, and entity name. The destination is a commercial account at Pacific Crest Commercial, he said. Beneficiary Tessa Vale Studio LLC. I looked at the screen and felt something in me settle into a colder kind of certainty. So that was the real shape of it. My sister hadn't maxed out my credit to stay afloat. She hadn't been trying to bridge a crisis. She was building a launch off my name. The showroom charge wasn't random. The electronics weren't random. The spa charge wasn't indulgence on the side. All of it was part of the same delusion: buy the look first, buy the image, buy the credibility, then use the final wire to secure the lease and make the fiction appear real. They burned $48,300 on retail and service transactions, Andrew said. Then attempted to wire the remaining $48,500 directly into the LLC to lock a commercial space. The wire only froze because the amount was high. The beneficiary had no established connection to your historical financial behavior, and the timing pattern tripped our anomaly model. I nodded once. They came here this morning to push the last part through before fraud could reach the right phone number. That is my professional assessment. I closed the notebook for a second, then opened it again. Print everything, I said. The transaction ledger, the application metadata, the IP trace, the uploaded ID, routing details on the LLC wire. Andrew paused. Not out of reluctance, out of procedure. If I provide the full audit packet directly to you, this becomes a formalized fraud claim with mandatory internal escalation, he said. We will report the fabricated identification and attempted wire activity to the appropriate authorities. There is no quiet resolution after that. I met his eyes. I'm not here for quiet. That was enough. Andrew turned to the industrial printer in the corner and hit the command. A second later, it came alive with a low mechanical hum. Then the sharp, steady sound of pages feeding into the tray. It sounded like a trap ceiling shut. Andrew collected the pages as they came out, squared the stack against the edge of his desk, stapled sections by category, and slid the full packet into a thick, gray evidence envelope. He didn't hand it over yet. First, he turned one monitor back toward me so we could finish the ledger while it was still live. I looked at the transaction sequence in order. The first cluster was all surface: furniture showroom, lighting supplier, premium electronics, a spa, high-end home accessories, the kind of spending people do when they want a business to look established before it is. Not infrastructure, not payroll, not legal filings, not insurance, cosmetics, optics, vanity with merchant codes. Then the vendor deposits started. A staging warehouse, custom signage, boutique brand consulting, expedited printing. Small on their own. Together. They told the truth my family had tried to bury under tone and posture. Tessa wasn't building something durable. She was buying the appearance of legitimacy and expecting the appearance to carry the rest. She wanted a polished launch, flattering photos, a branded office, an expensive bag on a marble table, and the right address on a lease. She didn't want the slow part. She didn't want the numbers. She wanted to skip straight to being seen. I thought about the way she'd stood in the lobby with that new coat on her shoulders, bored expression, phone in hand, acting like I was interrupting her morning. Not scared, not ashamed, irritated. That was the part that erased any remaining space for sympathy. If she had been trying to stay alive. This would have looked different. If this had been about medical debt, a landlord, a car note, a genuine emergency. The ledger would have told that story. Ledgers always tell the story eventually. This one said the money had gone into image, ego, and fantasy. My father had called it a bridge solution. My mother had called it family help. The bank records called it what it was: theft in formal wear. Andrew zoomed in on the last group of pending entries. The attempted wire was supposed to finish the structure, he said. Without it, the rest of these charges turn into stranded spend. I looked at the beneficiary line again. Tessa Vale Studio LLC. A company with branding before stability, lease before revenue, presentation before substance. My family hadn't stolen from me to survive. They had stolen from me because they believed my financial discipline existed to subsidize her delusion. That was the moral center of it. Not need, not panic, not hardship. Just entitlement dressed up as ambition. Andrew finally placed the envelope on the desk in front of me. I took it and stood. I took the envelope, zipped it into my bag, and adjusted my jacket before I moved. No rush, no visible anger. If they saw anything on my face, it was probably the absence of uncertainty. Andrew stood as I reached the door. The supplementary cards they're holding are permanently deactivated, he said. The outgoing wire has been canceled. The account is locked under active fraud status. Any further attempt to move funds will trigger escalation. I nodded once. Good. Then I opened the door and stepped back into the lobby. My mother rose immediately from the leather sofa with a look of polished triumph. Already certain the room had bent back into place. My father checked his watch and crossed his arms. Posture loose again now that he assumed the delay was over. Tessa looked up from her phone with bored impatience, one hand still hooked through the strap of that designer tote, like she was already late for something more important than a bank fraud inquiry. Finally, my mother said, voice carrying cleanly across the marble. I assume Andrew fixed the hold. Tessa has a meeting with the leasing agent in less than an hour. Ethan, we do not have time for this kind of behavior. My father took one step forward, reclaiming authority he thought had only been briefly interrupted. Sign whatever release they need, he said. We'll draft a repayment structure over the weekend and keep this inside the family where it belongs. Tessa gave a quiet, irritated exhale. Seriously, it's just credit. You act like someone took a kidney. I looked at all three of them, then answered my sister first. There is no release. The lobby went still. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The account is permanently frozen. The $48,500 wire to your LLC has been canceled. Every charge already posted is being flagged as fraud, for the first time that morning. Real panic broke through the surface. My mother's smile collapsed so fast it looked painful. You cannot do that. I already did. She moved closer, dropping her voice into a frantic whisper sharpened by rage. You are going to destroy your sister's launch over a temporary funding issue. I didn't call her mom. You opened a fraudulent account under my social security number, I said. You uploaded a fake government ID with my face, your signature, and Dad's office address. You rerouted bank verification to your phone. You attempted to wire stolen funds into Tessa's company. My father stepped into my space, using height and proximity the way he always had when he wanted compliance without resistance. You are going to walk back into that office and correct this. No. His face darkened. Don't push me on this. It's too late for that. I unzipped my bag just far enough to pull out the top page of the audit packet and held it flat between us. Not dramatic, just visible. This is the metadata from the application, I said. It traces the upload to your office network. The routing details on the wire prove the money wasn't going to a landlord escrow. It was going straight into Tessa's business account. The color drained out of his face in stages. My mother stopped moving, and Tessa finally looked from me to him with something other than entitlement in her eyes. Dad, she said quietly, what is he talking about? He didn't answer her. That silence told me more than any confession could have. My father's silence lasted less than 2 seconds. Then I watched the calculation return behind his eyes. The credit line was dead. The wire to Tessa's LLC was dead. The performance in the lobby had failed, so he did what men like him always do when the first lie collapses. He reached for the second one. Victor slipped one hand inside his suit jacket and pulled out a folded document printed on heavy cream legal stock. He unfolded it with deliberate care, like the paper itself carried authority. You think you can shut this down with one bank manager, he said quietly. He held the document just high enough for me to read the heading. Limited durable power of attorney. The words landed cleanly. No shock on my face, just acceleration. My father's mouth moved into the faintest version of a smile. We anticipated you might become difficult. You've been overloaded for months, traveling, working too much, not thinking clearly. So you signed a limited proxy authorizing me to manage your financial assets in the event you became impaired by stress. My mother saw the paper and shifted instantly, like a stage actress hearing her cue. The panic left her face. Concern replaced it. That's enough. Ethan, Lorraine said, loud enough for the tellers to hear. You've been under immense pressure. We stepped in to help because you were not in a condition to manage everything alone. Tessa stared at the document, confused now instead of angry. What is that? My father ignored her. He kept his eyes on me. It has a valid notary seal, he said, which means whether you feel emotional about it or not is irrelevant. If you force this situation any further, I can have your brokerage honor the proxy by end of day, at that exact moment. My phone buzzed in my hand. One vibration, sustained, sharp. I looked down at the screen. Security alert. Northline Institutional Wealth. Urgent request received to liquidate $275,000 from primary investment portfolio. Pending POA verification. For half a second, the whole architecture of it became visible. The bank had never been the main target. The card, the retail burn, the LLC wire. The chaos in the lobby at 7 in the morning, it was all noise. A loud, expensive distraction designed to keep me pinned here while the real theft moved through a different institution under the cover of a notarized document. They hadn't tried to steal one credit line. They had built a two-front operation to strip out the larger asset while I was busy stopping the smaller one. My father saw recognition hit and mistook it for defeat. That's right, he said softly. While your mother and sister dealt with this mess, I dealt with the serious accounts. The brokerage doesn't care about family arguments. It cares about legal paperwork. My mother folded her hands in front of her and looked toward the staff with practiced sorrow. My son has been spiraling, she said. We were trying to avoid making this public. He agreed that Victor should temporarily stabilize his finances until he got himself back under control. There it was. Not the fragile daughter narrative from another kind of story. Their male version of the same weapon. Burned out, unstable, overworked, not fit to manage his own money. If I raised my voice, they'd use it. If I lunged for the document, they'd use that too. If I gave them anger, they would translate it into incapacity. So I gave them procedure. Let me see it, I said. My father hesitated. His fingers tightened on the top corner of the document. He didn't trust my calm, which told me I had the right tone, but his ego was larger than his caution. He wanted me to read the terms of my own supposed surrender. He stepped closer and held it out under the fluorescent light without releasing it. I scanned the language fast. Standard proxy structure, broad authority over bank accounts, investment accounts, real property interests, and portfolio management. Sweeping powers hidden inside clean legal formatting. My forged signature on the execution line, a raised seal at the bottom. Notary public. I felt the air in the lobby thin out. Because now the story had changed scale. This was no longer about a fraudulent credit card and a sister's fake launch. This was an attempt to seize the foundation under my financial life and do it with paperwork solid enough to frighten institutions into compliance. The bank attack had been greed. This was strategy, and strategy leaves fingerprints. I kept my eyes on the bottom half of the document and ignored the rest. The liability clauses didn't matter yet. The broad authority language didn't matter yet. What mattered was the execution block. There was my forged signature. Below it, the date, October 17th. And directly under that, the raised blue seal of a notary public commissioned in the state of Illinois. My mother saw where I was looking and moved first. "Yes, Ethan," Lorraine said, folding her arms as if she were tired of repeating herself. October 17th, the day you finally came to your senses, drove to your father's office, and agreed to let him help you manage things before you ran yourself into the ground. My father said nothing. He didn't need to. He thought the document was enough, thought the seal was enough, thought institutional paper would always outweigh a human being standing in a lobby trying to deny it. I didn't argue. I unzipped the hard folder I had carried from my safe that morning, reached past the bank documents, and pulled out my passport. Then I opened it flat on the marble side table between us. "My point," I said, "is that on October 17th, I was in Singapore." No one spoke. I tapped the entry stamp with one finger. Then the exit stamp. I left the country on October 15th for an infrastructure risk summit and returned on the 20th. Here's the Singapore entry stamp. Here's the departure stamp. And here I pulled one more page from the folder and laid it beside the passport is the flight manifest from corporate travel. The silence that dropped over the lobby was immediate and absolute. The tellers behind the counter stopped moving. Even the guard by the entrance seemed to settle into stillness. My father looked down at the passport. Then at the forged power of attorney still in his own hand. The color drained out of his face so fast it almost looked staged. My mother's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Tessa stared at the stamps like she was waiting for them to rearrange themselves into something survivable. "You told Mom you were working from home that week," she said, voice thin and unsteady. "I told her I was unavailable," I said. I never told her where I was. Then I looked directly at my father. A notarized document is only valid if the principal physically signs it in the presence of the notary. If I was on another continent, then this isn't a paperwork dispute. It's notary fraud tied to attempted asset theft. I pulled out my phone, opened my encrypted mail app, and started typing. My father finally moved. "What are you doing closing the gap?" I addressed the first email to the Illinois Notary Fraud Division, then I copied my attorney, Northline Institutional Wealth Compliance, and the internal fraud contact Andrew had already put in my packet. I attached photos of the forged document, the passport stamps, and the flight manifest. My father's voice dropped into something desperate. "Ethan, stop." I hit send. "No." The sound behind me came a second later, the heavy click of Andrew Mercer's office door opening. Andrew Mercer stepped out of his office with the forged power of attorney already in his hand. He must have taken it the moment my father's grip loosened, because Victor looked over and realized too late that the last physical copy of his leverage was no longer his. "Mr. Cross," Andrew said, voice level and carrying across the lobby, "Northland just called my direct line. They received your email, the passport evidence, and the supporting travel manifest. They have locked your investment portfolio under enhanced fraud protocol." My mother made a sound that barely qualified as a breath. Andrew kept going. "They also triggered a multi-institution federal fraud escalation. Authorities are on the way to this branch now." That was the moment the room broke. Not loudly at first. Quietly. Structurally. The two tellers behind the counter stopped pretending to organize cash drawers. The guard near the entrance shifted into the center line of the doors. My father looked at the exit, then at Andrew, then at me. And for the first time all morning there was no authority left in him. Just arithmetic. He understood the numbers had turned against him. "Andrew," he said, trying to recover something smooth and executive. "This is a family misunderstanding. Call them back. Tell them the account holder is present and this was submitted in error." Andrew didn't move. "I have already secured the forged document," he said. "The fabricated identification, application metadata, and wire history are in the fraud file. This is no longer reversible." My mother grabbed my father's arm hard enough to wrinkle his sleeve. "Do something," she hissed. "Tell him to delete it. A victimless mistake doesn't require a fake ID." "Rerouted 2FA, a forged notary seal, and a liquidation attempt," I said. Tessa was shaking now. The coat suddenly looked too heavy on her. The designer tote on the table looked less like an accessory and more like evidence. "Ethan," she said, voice cracking, "I didn't sign anything. I just wanted to get the studio open. They told me you were backing it." "You knew I wasn't," I said. "You just wanted it to be true badly enough not to ask questions." My father made one last move toward the door. The guard stepped directly into his path and held up a gloved hand. "Sir, remain where you are." Victor stopped. He looked older in that second. Smaller. Then he turned back to me. Stripped of posture. Stripped of performance. "If federal agents walk through those doors, my firm is finished," he said. "Your mother and I could go to prison." I held his stare. "I'm not doing this to you," I said. "I gave them my real documents. You did the rest." Red and blue light flashed across the glass entrance. 2 city officers came in first. Behind them were 2 plainclothes investigators with Financial Crimes Task Force insignia on their vests. The lead detective bypassed my family completely and walked straight to Andrew and me. "Detective Elena Ruiz," she said. "Who is the victim I am?" I said. Andrew handed her the power of attorney and the envelope. Forged proxy, fabricated state ID, fraudulent signature tier credit application, attempted outgoing wire, and attempted liquidation of $275,000 from the victim's portfolio. I opened the passport to the stamped pages and set it beside the forged document. "The POA states I signed in Illinois on October 17th, I said. "My passport and flight records place me in Singapore from October 15th through the 20th. Detective Ruiz looked down once, then back at my father. "A family dispute is an argument," she said. "This is coordinated financial fraud." My mother tried anyway. No money was actually taken from the investments. Ruiz gave her a flat look. Attempted federal fraud still counts. The cuffs came out fast. My mother was first. She started crying the second the steel locked around her wrists. Not because she was sorry, but because the audience had changed. My father argued for about 10 seconds, demanded his attorney, invoked his business, his reputation, his standing. None of it mattered. The second set of cuffs closed on him with a sound that cut straight through the marble lobby. Tessa didn't get cuffed on the spot, but when Ruiz's eyes dropped to the designer tote and Andrew identified several charged purchases in the packet, she set the bag on the floor without being told. Her lease was dead. Her LLC was dead. Whatever version of herself she'd planned to unveil that week ended right there beside the coffee station. I watched the officers take my parents through the glass doors and out into the gray morning. I didn't feel triumph. Not the loud kind. Just relief. Quiet, exact relief. The kind that comes when a locked system works the way it was built to work. 3 weeks later. The rest collapsed on schedule. The notary flipped as soon as the commission investigators confronted her with the date conflict and the missing journal entry. She gave them internal emails showing my father had ordered the stamp under threat of termination. My parents were indicted on multiple felony counts tied to wire fraud, identity theft, attempted asset seizure, and conspiracy. My father's firm was hit with a compliance audit that froze contracts and gutted cash flow. Legal retainers drained what was left of their savings. They mortgaged the house to stay out of pretrial detention. Tessa lost the commercial lease the same week the case hit the local business journals. She unloaded the SUV, shut down the LLC, and took an entry-level admin job answering phones while attorneys sorted through what exposure she had left. I got a permanent restraining order against all 3 of them. They thought blood would outweigh records. They thought volume would beat sequence. They thought paperwork belonged to whoever was shameless enough to weaponize it first. They were wrong. The system doesn't care who raised you. It cares who can prove what happened. If your own family forged legal documents to strip your accounts and fund your siblings' fake business, would you press charges or let them walk to keep the peace? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories built on cold proof and real consequences, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Disclaimer. This story is fictional and created for entertainment purposes only. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental.